On behalf of the co-hosts and organizers of today's webinar, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to our speakers, our distinguished guests, and all the participants joining live or watching the recorded webinar. Today's webinar, Ocean Climate Action and the UNFCCC, Crests, Troughs, and the Wave Forward, is hosted by Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy, the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, Ocean Conservancy, the Ocean and Climate Platform, the World Resources Institute, and World Wildlife Fund. My name is Anna Marie Laura, Senior Director of Climate Policy at Ocean Conservancy, and it's truly a pleasure to be kicking off this discussion today. Our goal for the next 90 minutes is to set the stage for COP31 and some of what makes this year unique, given this COP's division and roles and responsibilities, some of which we've not seen before. To put the progress made and ambition yet to be realized for ocean climate action in the broader context of the year ahead, and really most critically, to give us solid, concrete examples for how progress can be achieved within the UNFCCC and at a COP. Thanks to the years-long effort of many individuals, organizations, and officials, some are with us today, the integration of ocean climate impacts and solutions is happening within the UNFCCC. From the very start of Because the Ocean, a campaign launched at COP21 in Paris, to Chile's first Blue COP, to the establishment of the Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue and the integration mandate that happened at COP26 in Glasgow, to the first ever Ocean Ministerial in Brazil at COP30, thanks to the Brazilian leadership, and lots of work to deliver all along the way, progress has been made. And for a complete background and history of how we got here to this moment, we really encourage you to visit the UNFCCC page on the ocean, and we'll provide that link in the chat. Integration is pivotal to success at the UNFCCC because we all know that ocean climate issues range from sea level rise impacts on infrastructure and communities, the adaptation needs for marine wildlife and fisheries, to the role of marine renewables and green shipping in a just energy transition. This is not even to mention protecting blue carbon habitats, phasing out offshore oil and gas, and addressing ocean acidification. The ocean could be and needs to be at every theoretical table when we're talking about climate change. And so while integration is pivotal, that also doesn't mean we never need to take center stage to take some big steps forward. And that's really what the opportunity of COP31 is. Discussions have already started about the strategic opportunity of this year for ocean climate action. And today we hope to empower everyone to engage and join those discussions by thinking thoughtfully about what the outcomes could be. Is it a negotiated outcome, a financial outcome, an action agenda, or civil society outcome? Why is this outcome important? What political will, implementation, or enabling conditions will result that help advance ocean climate action? And then how can it be achieved using the processes and the political opportunities that we have today? So we'll be doing our absolute best to stay on time and reserve 20 minutes for discussion and a Q&A session. And there will be a summary and a forward-looking paper produced following this webinar. That will include any of the questions that get asked, but also any outstanding questions. The Q&A will be moderated by Maureen Lasserf, Head of International Policy at Ocean and Climate Platform. And Maureen, over to you for a little bit more about how that session will be run.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Anna-Marie. It's a pleasure to be with all of you tonight in France. As Anna-Marie said, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So I encourage all of you to write in the chat and to add some questions into the Q&A, add some comments, some reactions. It's really important for us that all of you participate and can share your thoughts on the opportunities and the gaps for the ocean at COP31 and beyond. So as I said, just click on the Q&A session at the bottom and we'll answer all of the questions at the end. Thank you, and over to you, Anna-Marie.
So with this, let's jump right into our scene setting. I'd like to introduce Ingrid Lundberg and Ulrich Lennartz. Ingrid Lundberg has held senior roles within Australia's climate and foreign affairs portfolios, contributing to international climate negotiations and, especially important, regional climate cooperation initiatives in the Pacific region. Ulrich Lennartz has served as Director for International Climate and Energy Policy within Belgium's Federal Public Service for Health, Food Chain Safety and Environment since 2022. He's well known to the ocean community as one of the co-facilitators of the Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue and longtime leader in Friends of the Ocean and Climate. But he also is an expert in climate change negotiations, and within the EU, he's co-chair of the EU Strategic Expert Group on Global Climate Change Negotiations. And so we are in very good hands for a scene setting of what's to come with COP31. Ingrid, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Anna Marie. And good morning or good day or good afternoon and evening to all of you. It's morning where I am here in Australia. And I won't take long because I think Ulrich has a lot more to bring to the table in terms of ocean expertise. But from an Australian perspective, I just wanted to give a little bit of a sense of our year ahead. As Anna Marie said, my name's Ingrid Lundberg. I look after our COP31 Presidency of Negotiations branch in the Australian Department of Climate Change. And I'm really pleased to be joining you all today, albeit virtually, to connect on a topic which binds us all, the ocean climate nexus. So I think in Australia and across our region, although it's not unique to us, we share a really deep cultural, economic and environmental tie to the ocean. The Pacific in particular represents the living heart and the blue lung of the ocean climate nexus for our region. So I'm sure many of you have heard the exciting news, or I hope you've heard the exciting news. It's exciting from our perspective, announcing the location of the pre-COP this year. Australia will be responsible for, in partnership with the Pacific, hosting the pre-COP, and we welcome the announcement from the Pacific Islands Forum Chair, the Solomon Islands Prime Minister, Jeremiah Manelli, that the pre-COP and leaders' side visit will be held in Fiji. So the side visit will be Tuvalu, but the pre-COP and main event will be held in Fiji in October of 2026. So these events represent an unprecedented opportunity from our perspective for world leaders in particular to witness firsthand the effects of the climate crisis on the region, on the oceans, and to showcase Pacific climate leadership. We are specifically wanting to bring a selection, not all obviously, but of world leaders to the Pacific for that purpose. The Pacific Pre-COP is a key element of our Australia-Turkey COP31 partnership agreement, and it will build momentum in the lead up to COP31 in Antalya. Through the pre-COP and leaders' side visit, we are working together with Pacific Island Forum members and regional organisations to shine a global spotlight on our region with a particular focus on the ocean. I'd like to just take a moment to, thank the Pacific Island Forum Chair and PIF Secretariat for its support in coordinating this Pacific-led process and getting to a place where we know where we're hosting and when we're hosting. These events are being delivered in a genuine partnership with the Pacific to deliver on Pacific priorities where the ocean will be front and centre. The ocean connects our people and our livelihoods. It sustains us and holds the key to both mitigation and adaptation, as Anna Maria was talking about. When we act for the ocean, we act for the climate, and we act for the future of our region and the well-being of our people. This holds true at a global scale, and the importance of the ocean in carbon storage, in sequestration, weather regulation, adaptation, and coastal resilience is key. The story of the ocean and how it connects with climate has often been championed by the Pacific and other small island developing states, as well as Indigenous peoples, local communities, and civil society. And we want to focus our attention on those cohorts and the work that they have been doing so diligently for years. From those efforts and strong foundations that have been built in the UNFCCC, from things like the Ocean Pathways Partnership that Fiji delivered at COP23, the establishment of the Ocean Dialogue at COP25, last year's Leaders segment on the ocean, the Blue NDC Challenge, and the Blue Package at COP30. Now, looking ahead to this year, as the President of Negotiations, there is undoubted opportunity to deliver in the ocean climate space. Naturally, the Ocean Dialogue is a critical annual convening point, and with all of the work that you have done, we're in excellent hands, especially with our two co-facilitators. And along with the Standing Committee on Finance Forum, focusing on financing climate action in water systems and the ocean this year, and Australia and the Pacific are looking to host that forum in our region. These two examples are natural, but they're not limiting touch points of what we see this year as we ask ourselves what and how we can deliver for the ocean, because we're beyond asking the question of why or if we will. We're really keen to focus global attention on this issue this year as president of negotiations. And while we are leading on the negotiations and will be engaging strongly with parties to achieve consensus outcomes in this space, there are ocean climate opportunities in our Pacific Partnership approach on the pre-COP, and also in working closely with Turkey to ensure the blue thread, which mobilizes parties and civil society alike, continues to stay strong in the action agenda. The ocean is and will be a central focus for Australia, the Pacific and Turkey throughout this year to continue to build on the work that has come before us. So today, in particular, we are here just to listen and learn from the collective expertise on this call, and we look forward to an exciting blue year ahead. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the commitment and leadership already being demonstrated as head of negotiations. Ulrich, over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Annemarie and Maureen, for taking this initiative and for kickstarting this discussion on what can be delivered on ocean and climate this year. I think it's a very challenging question this early in the year, but I will do my best to at least bring a few elements that can help in constructing the picture. The first observation, and a quite obvious one, is that climate and Paris Agreement are not in the center of things today. Security, geopolitics, competitiveness of our industry are overshadowing multilateralism these days, and 2026 seems to amplify what happened last year. In that sense, and credits to Brazil, COP30 was a lot about upholding multilateralism and the relevance of the Paris Agreement. And while Brazil succeeded to keep almost every country on board, there are impacts on ambition. Too many countries still have to communicate their NDCs, and science tells that there will be irreversible impacts beyond a warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is very concerning, of course. And from an ocean perspective, it is crucial to keep focusing on climate ambition driven by science. The less mitigation, the more impacts on the ocean and its ecosystems, the larger the efforts needed on adaptation for coastal communities and states. So the crucial question before us this year is what can drive mitigation ambition and how can ocean action contribute? And I think one of the most dynamic processes presently is the roadmap for transitioning away from fossil fuels. Both the Colombia and Netherlands conference in Santa Marta and also the Brazilian COP presidency consultations on the roadmap really matter here. It will be important, I think, to deepen the sectoral dimensions of the transition efforts. And this means that both shipping, but also transitioning away from offshore fossil fuel production should be a full part of this undertaking. I think in this broader picture of ambition, the Blue NDC challenge is so important because it contributes, it demonstrates the contributions sustainable ocean-based action can make on both mitigation and adaptation, and it provides a coalition and a cooperation of the willing. And in that sense, it has the potential to become a roadmap like the one we will see on deforestation. Secondly, I would like to turn to the ocean and climate dialogue. Last year, we worked very much on this integration approach. So sustainable ocean-based action needs to be an essential part of the NDCs. Protecting marine ecosystems is a baseline for the adaptation efforts. and we need to underpin this by strengthening synergies, by science, and by means of implementation. This integration approach gained a lot of support, and indeed we see now that 80% of NDCs have an ocean component. And for that reason, as facilitators, and that will be Fiji and Belgium for this year, we will present a vision that is based on continuity, on coherence, and on implementation. But at the same time, it has to be ambitious and it has to be visible. And many countries called for a roadmap that would anchor ocean in the 5-year ambition cycle of the Paris Agreement. And I indeed think that is what needs to be done. So ocean action needs to feature in the transparency framework. It needs to feature in the means of implementation that are mobilized to support climate action, and also synergies with the NBSAPs need to be strengthened. There's also a question of giving more teeth to the ocean and climate process in UNFCCC. So going beyond delivering an informal report and ensuring ocean issues find their way in the different relevant decisions. This is something that needs to be addressed, and that also needs to be discussed with the COP presidency. But when doing so, at the same time, we need to avoid that we open up a long and difficult discussion on a formal agenda item. And also we need to avoid that we silo ocean issues in a small formal box. Thirdly, I think as we move from rulemaking to implementation, the action agenda gains in importance. And I was really impressed by the Brazil outcome on the restructured action agenda, with one of the 6 themes being forests, oceans, and biodiversity. And what we see now, and there was the presentation only last week at the Bureau of UNFCCC, is that the structure of the action agenda has been confirmed by the COP31 presidency, but also that the ocean topic, together with synergies, have been identified as clear priorities within this action agenda. And I think that's very important. Fourthly, and finally, I think the flow of events will be crucial to create traction and to build a strong action-oriented deliverable on ocean and climate by COP31. This event is, I think, very important to kickstart that flow of events. But what we need to do next is to build up for the ocean and climate dialogue. We also will have to make use of our ocean conference in Kenya. We have to work together to create political momentum in Fiji at the pre-COP, and then work on delivering for COP31 a durable ocean result. And of course, and that's the very final thing I want to say, simultaneously, we are preparing for the first COP on BBNG, which will elevate the protection of the high seas in the UN system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrich, so much for the context, both of these other processes happening in the UNFCCC, especially related to oil and gas, the roadmap that Brazil is creating, and the conference that's coming up in Santa Marta, and then also all this detail about potential path forward for the ocean and climate change dialogue, and really connecting to the ambition cycle of the Paris Agreement. To talk a little bit about how we got here, we're now joined by Angelique Popenow, and I'm just going to reshare my screen if I can, because we have Angelique and Elbia Ganem Elbia is the COP30 Special Envoy for Energy from Brazil. Angelique, of course, is the lead ocean negotiator for AOSIS. And Angelique, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna Marie, and thanks to the organizers for bringing us together early in the year and also at a very critical time of the sort of UNFCCC calendar, given the number of opportunities that is before us, and also the very Pacific-oriented year that we have ahead. So I've been asked to share a little bit of reflections around sort of where were we? Where are we now? Where are we going? So of course, I think it's always important to look back just how far we've come. The ocean, of course, it was in our agreements in the UNFCCC in the convention, as well as in the Paris Agreement, sometimes more explicitly mentioned, sometimes in the preamble. But in any case, or the sentiment, and I recall being part of the sort of these early conversations around 2018 or so, in fact earlier than that, yeah, 2017, 2016, 2017, the idea was that although there were these references, although there was a growing understanding of the importance of the ocean when it came to climate, there was a lack of sort of operationalization of that within the UNFCCC process. And we had many talanoas, sitting in a circle and discussing how to best advance this. And there were many ideas on the table, and they varied, right? I think one of the things to recall is that the conversation did start with thinking through, should we have an agenda item? And then we started to sort of organize and strategize about what would be the best way forward, what would bring about the most results when it came to what we wanted to see. And we've seen various efforts, and I categorize them a little bit, although they don't squarely fit in boxes, but I categorize them a little bit to sort of include sort of these state-driven initiatives, right? So very early on in Marrakesh, there was a sentiment that we should start bluing the NDCs, right? Including ocean and integrating ocean into the nationally determined contribution. So it's great to see. The NDC synthesis had a whole ocean section, and I think Ulrich mentioned that 80% of NDCs now do have an ocean component. So it's great to see that these efforts that started very early on are in fact materializing. And of course, it's not just around a policy documents. We've also seen a growing set of projects that are being funded through the international climate funds towards sort of this quote unquote ocean-based climate action. And sticking into what are state-driven efforts, but more so within the process, we've seen that there was a really strategic moment in our discussions where we felt, I think Ulrich just mentioned it, around perhaps we need to not keep this in a silo. We need to really think about how do we sort of integrate it across multiple issues, across multiple agenda items. And that, of course, is something that has in many ways borne fruit. We've seen that throughout the sort of 7 years. We've seen that we've had the Nairobi work program that has had an ocean focused dedicated themes. We've had the tech as well as the Standing Committee on Finance only this year having a whole forum around financing climate action and with regards to water and ocean systems. And then of course there's the global goal on adaptation where we are having discussions around having indicators that are ocean focused. So and sorry, just one more, because we really did sort of spread out, infiltrate everywhere. The other one, of course, is around renewable energy from an ocean lens. So we could see that ocean was sort of emerging, integrating into all these streams, in an attempt, I suppose, at the time to make sure that it wasn't becoming very siloed, very everything else is not ocean. This is the ocean space kind of approach. And then I think the other thing that others have already highlighted, and it's always good to hear from the co-chairs, is the or co-facilitators. I'm never sure is the ocean and climate change dialogue. All right, really emerging from a moment of having this dialogue to having it every year. And this is really the point of thinking about having these very dedicated spaces to continue building understanding, to exchange learning around ocean climate action. And I think it's a critical moment, right? And one the fact that we've done a few of these now. Um, we've looked at a few topics. There's and where we've got new co-chairs, new co-facilitators. It seems to be an opportune moment to sort of evaluate based on the strategy that we as the ocean community sort of talked about back then. Um, how far are we? Have we achieved the things that we envisioned? Have we really moved the needle on the ocean agenda? And I think inevitably the answer is in part, absolutely. But then the question becomes, is the continuation of what we have in itself progress? Or is there something else that we're looking towards? And that's where I think there is a real moment, especially with the heavy Pacific leadership that we're looking to have this year, a real moment to think about where are we going, evaluate the strategy. Has it been successful? Have there been shortcomings? To what end? And is what is the next stage, right? We've got all these blue NDCs. Now what? And certainly from a very AOSIS perspective, translating that from policy into actual action is what is pivotal. So we've mobilized the policy. We now need to think about how to translate that into action. I think the other pivotal sort of timely piece is the global stocktake. One of the wins that the ocean community, often highlights is the fact that ocean was in the last global stocktake. But I think it's important, not this time as we begin the global stocktake process, to think about having it there again is sufficient, right? One of the things we need to think about is, will we be saying something different in the global stocktake? Has there been progress since the last one? And where are we? What is the call to action? What is the invitation? What is the encouragement that we are looking to have in the next GST? And I think it will be reflective if the call to action is simply a repetition of what it was in the first GST. And I think with that in mind, in a view that we don't want to just repeat ourselves, one of the things that I think is worth considering is really a moment of reconvening as the ocean community, re-strategizing, having that evaluation, and really thinking about what next. We've already heard the points about the action agenda, whether it should be within negotiations. We have options. I think, though, in sort of sticking to our strategy every now and then it is worth an evaluation to see if we need to readjust or if we stay the course. And I think this year is timely, and the leadership of the Pacific can be very critical to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angelique. Thank you so much for helping capture where we are and where the intent was when a lot of this work started. We're really, really lucky to be joined now by Albia Ghanem, the Special Envoy for Energy from COP30, because, of course, the ocean community has been tracking all of this action very closely, and we can say how much integration has happened. But we wanted to hear from someone who was really engaged at COP30 to see how it went from their perspective. Albia is also the president of the Brazilian Wind Energy and New Technologies Association. She's also the vice chair of the Global Wind Energy Council, and she's previously held senior roles in Brazil's energy sector, including at the Ministry of Mines and Energy. So, Elbia, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'd love to hear from your perspective how the ocean, the integration, and elevating ocean climate at the COPs went from your perspective. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Annie. Thank you for this invitation. I'm so glad to be here. I have a colleague as a special voice, Marinade Scherer, that I believe she will be here. And I have been learning with Marinade about the ocean because as a professional in energy, sometimes I think, oh, how can I contribute in this discussion about the ocean? But the integration, the view of integration with ocean is very important because here in Brazil, we have investments in energy. The first thing is about the oil gas sector. We explore the ocean for a long time. But recently, we have been discussing the possibility to start with projects for offshore wind. Brazil is a very big, very huge potential for onshore wind. Onshore wind is the second source for energy and electricity in Brazil. But we have it onshore. And in our discussion about the ocean, we see that Brazil has this huge potential exactly because the position that Brazil are and the influence of sea, mainly Atlantic, because the wind from Atlantic is very strong and it contributes for producing electricity, wind here. Brazil, the productivity for wind in Brazil is very high. And the reason is because our position and because the Alisius wind that comes from Atlantic Sea. Then when we started to discussion about the whole of the ocean for our projects, for our investment, we have been learning how much is important to pay attention about the discussion about the whole of the ocean in your investments and in your potential. For offshore wind, of course, we, as a vice chair in Global Wind Renewable Source Council, we started to discussion and we create a very strong coalition, and this offshore wind world coalition. And we have been working partnership with companies and the ONGs that works for ocean pathway. Then we have been learning and understanding that the ocean needed to be in very important position for us, and we needed to bring desire for investors. Because the investors are prepared to invest in the whole world. It's not only in Brazil. As I said, Brazil is starting now, but we have big investments in other countries. We start with offshore wind in European countries, in Norway, the first, but UK and the other countries. We have investments, and we have been producing wind electricity. And we know that when you think about the energy transition, when you think that we need to go for this new economic model, we need to think as ocean with or first source for production, because we have in our portfolio for produce electricity, the main source is wind and solar plants. And this kind of, the both kind of source is very dependent from ocean. And for influence of ocean, or we can produce electricity in ocean. Then anyway, we need to pay attention. We need to join and work and create conditions for looking for ocean as economic potential, but we need to understand this economic potential, but we need to understand the importance to create a program for conservation and for maintain the regular works in activities in ocean. Then we are so engaged in this discussion. We want to say that as producer of electricity, as professional that has been work with energy transition, we know how much ocean is important, and we need to join, we need to participate and engage in this discussion. Then we are here in Brazil, we are 30 special envoy. My main role is about the energy, of course, but we know that there are intersection in other subjects, and in the subject ocean for us is really important, and for this reason I'm here, and I'm joining with us, and we intend to work with us in order to create better conditions to include society in this discussion and include investors and the financial institution to understand better how to manage this. In Meili Pontes is about this. Brazil, we know that as a special envoy and the Brazilian, we noticed that the COP30 was a big success for us. Of course, there are so many things to address. We are prepared now for we are prepared for the next events, the next conference, pre-COPs in Bonn and the others. And we are available to discussion and to detail the main points that we discussed in COP30. And the President Lula has been working the Putty Ocean as a very important point, and it's for us is a very important sign from our president, and your president for COP30, André Correia do Lago, are so engaged in these discussions too. Then I'm here. Then I only to say that we want to work with us, with you, and we are so available to learn more and to contribute more in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And also thank you for reflecting on the importance of the of your national leadership and setting an agenda for the ocean, and the partnership between you and Dr. Scherer as the ocean envoy. It's wonderful to see Brazil include the ocean envoy, and we hope that definitely will continue in the future because it obviously had a big impact. I'm going to quickly now pass it after hearing from Angelique and Elbia about what has gone well and how ocean climate action, the profile has been raised. We're going to move to Dr. Svendra Michael, who is the Permanent Secretary for Environment and Climate Change and a leading Pacific voice in global environment and climate diplomacy. He is also one of the co-facilitators of the UNFCCC Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue. He is a wealth of information, not just about the UNFCCC, but about all ocean negotiations. And Dr. Michael, we're so excited to have you to hear more about what we still need to do, where we need to consider raising the ambition, even though we've seen a lot of progress. Over to you.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're joining from what part of the world. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and great to come after Ingrid, Ulrich, and Angelique as in particular. I think a lot has been, discussed already by the previous speakers in terms of the gaps and the opportunities, which was supposed to be what I was going to be speaking about. But just very briefly as well, I think over the past cycle, as Angelique had mentioned, we have really consistently strengthened the ocean place in the climate governance. And one of those ways is definitely this dialogue, which has become a regular convening point under the UNFCCC. Although only mandated since COP25, we have actually, had an opportunity to discuss a range of evolving topics, from ocean-based measures in NDCs to ocean climate biodiversity indexes, and a lot of which has also informed negotiations in other spaces such as the CBD. We also, as also mentioned by Angelique very, very clearly, that the first global stocktake in COP28 really recognized the ocean's role in achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement, and also really encouraged the implementation of the integrated multi-sectoral solutions. And I think one of these that was really clear for them was, how do we ensure we can have like marine and coastal ecosystems? So we have seen that, parties have actually, and I say this quite frankly, have actually taken that and interpreted that in their own way. And you've seen how it still remains fragmented. It's still not embedded within the core UNFCCC outcomes. And one of these good examples that I always use is looking at how much of the embedding really happens at the technical, or rather actionable point. And GGA is one of them, the indicators, as we were developing these indicators, where ocean struggled to find its space because of its cross-cutting nature, and most of the time it was just curbed or morphed into a word where we were like looking at ocean ecosystems. And then of course we have the regular debate around mountainous ecosystems or forest terrains and so forth. And I think this is what I think what we refer to as the lack of structural integration across the negotiation tracks. And this is a central gap that remains uneven across the UNFCCC pillars. I think it's really clear that increasingly we reference the work around oceans, or have a slight, articulation of what that means. Maybe in adaptation, like I said, in the GGA or in other adaptation, negotiation items. It's very less visible, I think, for me still right now in my analysis within the mitigation outcomes. And as everyone would clearly tell you, that it's rarely linked systematically to any of the finance architecture as well. And so I think this really matters, because climate action under the Paris framework really requires cohesion across mitigation, adaptation, and finance, and it's not compartmentalizing all of this. So yes, the decisions, for example, that invite work programs to integrate ocean action. But to be honest, these are just invitations. They are not translated into binding negotiating texts across mitigation, across finance outcomes in a way that really influences real commitments. My second point is, around finance for ocean action, which I'm not sure if Mika is on the call, but him and Angelique and the AOSIS team have really spent substantive amount of time, shaping and really clarifying what this long call for scaled up financing looks like. When we talk about accessible, predictable, and tailored to the needs of seeds and Pacific seeds, this looks at having dedicated support for ocean-based climate solutions as well. And right now, as we speak, yesterday, actually today, tomorrow and Thursday is really pivotal for the region as a whole, for the Pacific region as a whole, because we have the Ocean Finance Week that's happening here in the Pacific Islands Forum. And that's really important, because you will see that now and it's the first time we have GCF that has flown over to, and the CIF colleagues have flown over to try and come and understand, the things that are happening in the region, and how, yes, we have the Pacific Resilience Facility being set up in the region. We have many other models like in the CARICOM that has been that the Caribbean states that have been set up. But for them to come and understand how it is integrated within the financing proposals within, because still we are seeing 1 in every 10 projects that looks at ocean priorities are moving through this climate finance architecture under the UNFCCC financing mechanism that gets approved. And that for us is an increasing worry when we get, increasing amounts of comments from GCF or from Adaptation Fund on the justification process. And I think that's something that, really remains a core gap when it comes to practical and achieving tangible outcomes, because you still see this very big divergence in the way we think. And I think, I always refer to the great Albert Einstein, who says that, we cannot change the outcomes that was achieved from a particular way of thinking. We really need to change the way we think if we want to change the outcomes that we are trying to achieve. And I think that's something that's really happening in these spaces that are being co-created, that are being recognized to try and look at how climate finance continues or discuss how climate finance continues to fall short of the proportional investment that's required for adaptation versus mitigation, and how finance for ocean solutions remains a very small fraction of the global flows. And so I guess the gap that we really need to look at in going into COP31, or we must address head on, if ocean is to be more than a talking point, is the substantive gap of implementation. And Ulrich and Ingrid have spoken about, and even Angelique has spoken about, some of the journeys, I would say the river that we have actually flown, and the bumps and the curves that we have gone through to get where we are today. Some has worked, potentially well, and some, are still, very surface level discussions. And I think that's something that we really need to recognize in this space as we are also progressing the dialogue, where we have spoken a lot about implementation. We just came out of an implementation COP, and where to from here. I think that's really important. My next point is the operationalization of the ocean climate tools. I think there are really a lot of commitments and tools that could be game changers, but they're still nascent, right? And I think one of these is like the Blue NDC Challenge, right? The Ocean Task Force, which was launched at COP30. We are trying our level best to accelerate the integration of ocean actions. And I just saw the article by WRI that has done this analysis around how many NDCs actually have ocean targets. And it's so building on these initiatives is really important, but such tools must really move from being a pilot to something that's widely adopted policy, mechanisms well before we reach pre-COP or even COP31. My last point is just to really recognize the unique political configuration. I think for the first time in all of the COPs that I've attended in the last decade, this is the first time that I think we are, having a COP where we have the presidency of the COP and the presidency of the negotiation. And this is the first of its kind that's done in partnership with the Pacific, because in COP23, it was, Fiji's COP. And yes, it was a Pacific COP because we leveraged on our PIF partnership. But, having our big brother, Australia be part of this process and really recognizing the role of the Pacific is something that's really, really going to, look at an opportunity on how we can really emphasize the ocean priorities given the geographical location of the pre-COP. And so I think for us right now, the thinking is really around elevating the lived experiences. The side event in Tuvalu would be hopefully an eye-opener to our leaders, looking at the scientific urgency and also an opportunity to discuss how regional priorities are really, need to be recognized within in this space, and what does it mean as well for us. And so My point is, as Elric has mentioned, that in the lead up to pre-COP 31 and COP 31, there are still many other avenues outside the UNFCCC space that will happen, including our ocean dialogue, the PrepCom that's happening in a few weeks, that is going to have a heavy focus on finance, as well as the architecture, the rules of procedure, and so forth. And this needs to be moving beyond just a moment of strategically sequencing how we get to durable outcomes, but really recognizing as well and getting the political momentum to really push for outcomes that we really would like to see. We have still a plastics treaty that is yet to be negotiated and completed. We have many other meetings before COP 31, such as the CBD COP that's also happening this year, and also, as mentioned by Ulrich, the fossil fuel phase out or the fossil fuel treaty meeting in Colombia that's also happening. So I really hope that we use these moments to elevate the ocean considerations that is required. We really anchor the priorities of our ocean priorities within the discussions around finance modalities that are usable, that are pragmatic for parties as well, and also signal our commitment to ocean and climate operational pathways on a horizon that is also achievable even beyond our time as negotiators, and those that come after us are able to look at that as well. So I will not repeat any of the other points, but really the work to date has been really remarkable. And I think the question before us, and I invite everyone in the audience to really think about this, is not if the ocean is included. It's really, is the ocean embedded in the outcomes that parties can implement, finance, and be held accountable for? And that distinction really matters.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. It's an incredibly important distinction. And to move quickly to one of your points, that there's a lot lacking in terms of embedding in negotiations. We're very lucky to have Sue Biniaz here, who is a expert in negotiations, an expert in international law, and is currently a senior fellow at Yale. Sue, I'm just going to pass it directly over to you to give us some examples of negotiated outcomes that we all can keep in mind as we think exactly about what Dr. Michael just encouraged us to.
Thank you, Anna Marie, and I'll be brief because I actually have to catch a plane very, very soon. Well, when I think about COP outcomes, I try to think about them in terms of two dimensions, and one is subject matter, and the other is type. And when it comes to ocean climate issues, I think if you want to think about subject matter, I sort of put things into four possible buckets. One is mitigation, where you have like ocean-based energy, ocean-based sequestration, shipping. The second would be ocean protection or adaptation, which would include protection against sea level rise or marine protected areas. The third would be sort of UNFCCC Paris specific issues. And to me, that would include something about blue NDCs, an ocean agenda item, which could be debated whether that's a good idea or not. And the fourth would be ocean-related finance, such as direction to the Standing Committee on Finance or direction to some kind of fund outside of the process. So that's the subject matter. Then type of outcome. I have three. Could be a negotiated outcome, which would be like a decision of the COP or the CMA. Second would be, it could be an initiative or an event under the auspices of the presidency. And we're lucky this year in a way to have two different presidencies. And thank you, Ingrid, for joining this webinar. And the third is it could be a side event or an announcement or a coalition of some kind of subgroup of parties or a particular region or other actors on whatever topic. It could be offshore wind, offshore oil and gas, green shipping corridors, new MPAs, et cetera. So you have to take the subject matter and the type of outcome and kind of match them together to figure out what your desired outcomes are. So I'm going to focus on negotiated outcomes, which, as we know, are the hardest ones to achieve. They require consensus or something very close to consensus. And as I think Ulrich pointed out, especially now with the geopolitics, that's not that easy to achieve. At the same time, negotiated outcomes can have great value. They send a very strong signal when the entire world agrees to something. And in some cases, they're actually necessary. Like we would not have gotten the annual climate and ocean dialogue if we did not have a sort of consensus decision, because it's an official process. Even negotiated outcomes can have different types, have different flavors. So let me sort of pull those apart for a minute. And I have sort of three different types. One, they can be very substantive, or they can even be norm creating. At one time within one of our groups of Friends of the Ocean and Climate, we talked about potentially seeking a provision in the COP outcome to the effect that anthropogenic sea level rise shouldn't affect states' maritime zones. That was one of the outcomes of the Pacific Island Forum. President Biden also opined on the subject. If you had something like that in a COP or CMA outcome, it would be very substantive. Similarly, at one point we talked about, why do greenhouse gases only have global warming potentials? Why don't they also have ocean impact potentials? If you were to go in that direction, that would be very substantive. Okay, so that's one category. The second is they can be very prescriptive. You could say parties should address the ocean in their NDCs, and they should do it in the following ways. That would be calling upon parties to do something kind of individually. The third is more process and institution related, and there the examples would be you could request a particular subsidiary body to prepare guidance on the integration of ocean issues into, let's say, NDCs or NAPs. You could call for, and that would be particularly relevant this year, you could call for the second global stocktake to devote significant or particular attention to the ocean. You could set up some kind of work program on the ocean, or develop some kind of action plan. Action plan is more kind of outward facing. A work program is more inward facing. So there are all kinds of things you can do with respect to the institutions of the FCCC and the Paris Agreement. And there's obvious overlap between and among these three categories. So I would just give a couple of my own observations before leaving you. First, I think it's a good year, as others have said, to press for ocean-related negotiated outcomes. We have a ocean-friendly president for negotiations in the body of Australia. We have a special role for the Pacific this year. I imagine that Turkey is also in favor of these kinds of outcomes. So that's good. Second, though, I think it's useful to think carefully about the value added of a negotiated outcome as compared to a non-negotiated outcome, right? Like you really have to think through, what do I think is achieved by having something agreed by consensus, given how hard it is to agree to things by consensus? And also, are there any downsides to agreeing to that particular thing by consensus? For example, the example of an agenda item, many think further silos the issue rather than better integrating the issue into the rest of our work. Third, I think it's important, just timing-wise, this year to try to converge early in the year on what should or could be achieved from the COP, and then kind of reverse engineer backwards from that so as to make best use of all the events throughout the year. For example, we've got Our Ocean Conference, we've got various ministerials later this spring, we have the pre-COP and all kinds of events in the Pacific, and it would be useful to use each of those to kind of advantage and to create momentum towards a kind of almost pre-agreed COP31 outcomes. Fourth and last, I would say it's useful to double track. So in case you cannot reach consensus at the end of the day, you have some kind of plan B that you can pivot to that you've already thought through. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks so much. And thanks for joining despite time conflicts. As you guys can tell, we have moved into the last session before discussion of the webinar. And Sue is our first speaker on this, but we're really trying right now to sort of bucket the types of outcomes that we might see at a COP, to think through what the options and pathways are for ocean at COP31. So we've heard from Sue on those negotiated outcomes. We're now going to move to Davi Bonavides. He serves as the deputy head of climate negotiations within the Climate Department of Brazil's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He also, prior to this position, held diplomatic assignments within Brazil's Foreign Service and contributed to multilateral environmental negotiations and other international climate policy agreement. Devi is going to talk to us about some of the potential and the buckets for the finance outcomes that we can see through the UNFCCC and at a COP. And so Devi, over to you.
Thank you, Anna-Marie. Let me start by stating that I'm honored to speak at this event organized by institutions that I truly admire, and also to speak right after Ms. Subinias. It is an honor. I also let me apologize for not staying until the Q&A session, but I won't get a plane, but I have to get my son at school. So I was asked to provide an overview of the range of finance-related outcomes that can result from a UNFCCC COP. So I think that this is a very interesting topic because it's ultimately an evaluation of the multilateral system and the climate regime as a whole. Our position has always been that the multilateralism is always a challenging effort, but the world would not be better without it. So it's we have to insist on the system. And as for the climate regime, we try to convey a message in our COP that the system is working. It's not working as fast as we would like, and we have to change it so that we can really have a shift towards implementation. But we are always thinking on how we can get to the goals that we set to achieve. But it is also important to look back and to evaluate the regime that we have in comparison to a world without it. So as it was recognized by parties in the multi-round decision, we believe that the regime is working, and we have to defend it. We have to make it better so that it can present real and concrete a concrete difference to the reality of people, but we have to defend the system. So what range of outcomes can we expect from the UNFCCC COP? So first, I would start also by reflecting on the boundaries that we as negotiators we have to respect. The first one is the legal competence of the climate regime. Of course, there are synergies with other regimes. I'm looking at Michael here to just mention the CBD, the BBNJ process was also mentioned, the negotiations on plastic, which all have synergies with our debate in the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. But we have to to respect the different mandates of those regimes. The other boundary that we have that we face as negotiators is the mandates that were set by previous COP. This is something that can change depending on how parties are willing to engage in the debate, but it is always something that limits our work there. And ultimately, the range of the political will of parties in order to engage on that specific topic, on how to address that specific topic. So I'll say that these are the main limitations for the work of parties in the climate regime when we are discussing a possible outcome for a conference of the parties. This will be especially difficult this year as it was last year because of the challenging geopolitical context and the challenging context for climate finance specifically. But we are in the middle of the cycle of the Paris Agreement cycle. So we are beginning to prepare the work for the next GST. So this also provides us an opportunity to reflect on how to plant the seeds now that will make a difference in the next GST in the next cycle that we will have from the Paris Agreement. So looking back at the past COPs that we had, the most recent years, there are examples of important decisions that not necessarily directly affect the policies of parties, but they truly influence the way that we see climate action and the way that we see the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So on finance specifically, we had the debates on the NCQG. We had the roadmap on the 1.3 trillion. And now, considering the results of the past COP, we had the Veredas dialogue on the implementation of the 2.1c, which is about the alignment of financial flows to the objectives of the Paris Agreement, and the call for the tripling of adaptation finance. These are all decisions that, although they do not mention specifically ocean as one of the thematic topics, but they are all related to the debates on climate change and ocean. Being more specifically on this topic, on ocean and climate change, we had the dialogue, of course, and I think that these all reflect on on how countries are implementing their national policies and how they are planning. And it's important to highlight the fact that several countries are now including specific references to ocean in their NDCs, which is, at least for us, one of the main tools for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, the NDCs and the NAPs, we should not forget. So what do we have for the COP31? I think this is as Ms. Su mentioned, this is a very interesting year for ocean and climate change, and more specifically for ocean and climate finance, because besides the ocean dialogue, we will have the SCF forum, specifically focusing on ocean and water system. I'll have the honor of co-chairing this forum with my colleague from Australia. So it will be the two presidencies working directly on the forum. And I hope that this forum can reflect on some topics that are important. First, the challenges that we face on mobilizing climate finance for ocean action. Many of these challenges will be the same challenges that we face in other thematic areas. So we also need to explore, to debate what are the specificities of the challenges that we face for ocean, for climate action related to ocean. And finally, what are the lessons learned on the implementation of action already presented in the national policies of parties that can be replicated, that can be scaled up as a group, as the international community. Apart from the SCF forum, we will have two important processes this in COP31, not only in COP31, but throughout the year. The first one is the Veredas dialogue on the 2.1c, which is the successor of the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogue. We will have for the first time, a work program on climate finance, which is still a very broad discussion that we will need to work on the details of what will be discussed on this work program. And also, we will have, as always, the guidance to the funds. So these are all tracks where we, under the climate finance negotiations, where we can reflect how to better include ocean in the negotiations, in the call for parties. Ultimately, we hope to see the continuation of this shift towards implementation, towards concrete action, but also this reflection on how we can already start building the debate for the GST, the second GST. Ms. Su also mentioned the other possibilities apart from negotiated outcomes, and we as Brazil, as presidency of COP30, we had the privilege of having one of the important outcomes of our COP coming from a non-negotiated outcome. Apart from the action agenda, which we are very proud of the results, we had the roadmap on the 1.3 trillion. And this is an example of an outcome that sometimes it's better to have it outside the negotiated process than in the formal negotiated process, because then we have the liberty, let's put it like that, the space to go beyond what we would achieve as a consensus decision by parties. So we also be working this year on a roadmap to the phase out of fossil fuels and on the deforestation. So these also have an impact on ocean, and we are very eager to receive the comments from our stakeholders. So in closing, I would say that this is going to be a very interesting year for ocean and climate change. And we are ready to work not only with our partners from other parties, but with all stakeholders that are interested in this debate to find ways to have the best outcome for COP31. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Davi. Incredible that we're able to hear directly from negotiators, seasoned negotiators like Sue and yourself back to back, to really help us think about what kinds of outcomes are possible and the pros and cons of, negotiated outcomes versus those that happen outside of the system or outside of negotiations. I'm going to now introduce Lasse Brun. He's a food systems and climate change expert and an accomplished thought leader on protein diversification and social justice. He has over 20 years of policy experience. He's also a governance professional with a longstanding trustee and board level experience. In 2021, he was appointed to the Global Civil Society Lead on Sustainable Consumption for the UN Food Systems Summit and co-lead of the summit's work on food systems management. So we're very lucky to have Lasse because we can hear from someone not inside the ocean community, but from someone from the food systems community on how you all have really used the UNFCCC processes to advance these similar kinds of priorities that really can be very cross-cutting. And so looking forward to hear from you about your examples. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me here today. In the interest of time, and since a lot of issues have been mentioned, I'm going to try to keep this relatively short, so there's going to be time for Carissa and for debate as well. And good luck to you, Devi. I see you're leaving now too with the pickup of your child. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly talk through some of the specific mechanisms that advances have been made within the UNFCCC on food issues. I mentioned on some other multilateral initiatives and come with some concrete suggestions for oceans. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There you go. So I just wanted to bring up a few examples. So this is the Coronivia Joint Work on Agriculture, now also called the Sharm el-Sheikh Joint Work on Agriculture. It's the only formal negotiation space specifically for agriculture. And again, just mentioning a few examples. So one of the advancements that was made, there's now a formal UNFCCC recognition of agriculture as a cross-cutting issue that deals with mitigation, adaptation, soil issues, livestock, food security. Some of the ways that was reached were through COP decisions, technical workshops, annual Coronivia agenda items, and knowledge exchange. And what that has led to is sustained technical work stream, informing methods, and capacity building. So, and I've been told the slides are going to be shared, so I've included links to everything. So for those who are interested, they can dig deeper on that. Next slide, please. As been mentioned already as well, the NAPs, National Adaptation Plans, play a crucial role. It's great to see Brazil just came out with a very great NAP here the other day, which I look forward to digging into deeper, particularly on the agriculture issues. Within NAPs, there's also been some advancement. Now, food security, agriculture, and rural livelihoods is part of the conversations around NAPs. And that has been reached mainly through processes under the Adaptation Committee, technical guidelines, and access to adaptation finance and readiness support. That has meant that issues, when you talk about national adaptation plans and national security, aspects of irrigation, early warning, resilient crop, livestock issues is part of that as well. Next slide, please. And briefly just on the NDCs, now we're seeing NDCs mentioned in the vast majority of countries, including issues of agriculture, land use, food security. And some of the ways that has been reached has been through very detailed work on making sure that agriculture became part of the NDC submissions and providing technical support for updates and conditional pledges. And just a little brief note on that is the importance of helping to guide the NAP writers the NDC authors on getting it in there, particularly from a food perspective, which I can speak to specifically. You'd be surprised of in many ministries of agriculture I've been speaking with, where quite senior people actually never have heard of NDCs. And if they've heard of them, they don't know the details around it. So it's no wonder that in the past, issues of agriculture, maybe oceans, have been short mention in NDCs when the ministries that are working on those issues are unaware with the UNFCCC processes. Next slide, please. And this horrible overcrowded slide is just to show so many other opportunities for engaging in what you specifically see as your issue, in this case, oceans, while looking at some of the examples we've done on food, Santiago network, this early warning systems, Article 6, and so forth. But again, this is going to be shared and everything is linked. So you can go in and see how we advance, what mechanisms were used, and what the impact is, and what the next steps can be. Next slide, please. Here, again, of interest at time, as this was alluded to already, it's important just to keep in mind that some of the limitations when it comes to ensuring that your topic in question becomes part of the UNFCCC process is that some of the parties see if it's mentioned one place, it shouldn't be mentioned, it shouldn't be engaged to a higher extent in another place. And one concrete example is that we've seen issues of having food systems mentioned in the ambition and implementation work program because some of the parties saw, well, it's already part of Sharm el-Sheikh Coronivia process, so we didn't need to take it in here. So a key barrier there sometimes is to really demonstrate to the parties, to the member states, that it needs to be across the different programs, whether it is originally relevant to food systems or not. Next slide, please. There you go. I just wanted to mention, and as was being alluded to already, like the bigger narratives and non-negotiated initiatives to bring countries together play a huge role. Within food, the biggest one was a few years ago, COP28, where 159 countries, almost all member states, signed the UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action. And that narrative and the political pressure helps with the negotiations, and often sometimes can be the issue that pushes somebody down the fence on the right side when an NDC or an app needs to be penned. And I would be remiss not to mention an initiative that UN Foundation is leading, which is the Global Protein Diversification Coalition, bringing countries together to talk about equitable distribution of protein, animal and plant-based protein globally. In the countries we're initially engaging with is Denmark, Gambia, Ghana, and Brazil. And the aspiration with that is, of course, to see how having this non-negotiated space can help countries to take those specific actions, in this case, equitable distribution of protein, and incorporate it into the NDCs and NAPs. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is my last slide. So just as I mentioned already, foster inter-ministry collaboration. It's really important to help member states to bridge a gap between ministries of climate, agriculture in my case, and finance, and for most of you guys, the ministry that deals with oceans. and build into existing initiatives, even if they seem unrelated first. Try to come over that barrier I mentioned before, making sure that the member states see that as being relevant to include in an app and NDC, even though there's a very specific process for food systems, oceans. And linked to the other Rio conventions, so the CBD Cup in Yerevan, Armenia, has already been mentioned, but it's increasingly important, and we're seeing the alignment of NDCs and BSAPs, for instance, becoming bigger and bigger as we progress towards bigger collaboration between the Rio conventions. I think I will just go and mention that in the interest of time again, what other UN check what other UN and multilateral processes are relevant. It might be something you haven't thought about before, and also, well, as always, check what kind of funding that comes with other UN processes that can be used for oceans as well. And very concretely, is a follow-up from the UNOG 3 last year. There's an opportunity now to look at a follow-up on that, specifically look at regional fisheries management and see how that can help push the climate change, food security, livelihood, animal welfare, and responsible consumption and production agenda. Much more to share, but to make sure everybody can get a seat at the table for this webinar, I'm going to finish here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for providing such clear examples that we can keep in mind in terms of what outcomes need to be achieved and then what tools there are to do that at the UNFCCC. So I will turn it now over to Krista Kasperzak. She's the Director of Climate Policy at Conservation International. She's held senior roles in climate advocacy, multilateral engagement, and a lot of those working on UNFCCC processes. So Krista, over to you for some additional concrete examples we can all keep in mind.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna Maria. And I will keep it super brief, so maybe we have time for a question here. But something, right, that kind of came to my mind thinking about an example here is thinking about where more of the forest community has been over the last, over 10 years on really reaching kind of global consensus around halting forest loss by 2030, and thinking. Right, that really started in 2014 with the New York Declaration on Forests, and this is, a lot of the speakers have highlighted this, that the progress to actually get to the global stocktake agreement in 2023 to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030 had a lot of milestones in between, and most of those actually were outside of the UNFCCC, right? So there was the Sustainable Development Goals, right? With a goal on forests and ecosystems, the Paris Agreement, right, which cements the importance of forests in Article 5. And then there was, a presidency initiative and along with at COP26 in 2021 to kind of reaffirm the New York Declaration on Forests, the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests and Land Use, right? And then there was the Global Biodiversity Framework goal to halt nature loss by 2030 in 2022, right? And that got us then to 2023, the Global Stocktake Agreement to halt and reverse deforestation at 2030. So it really took kind of these iterative, kind of inside, outside UNFCCC processes, some within the UN, but some kind of taking, getting commitments and political buy-in from governments, from civil society, from corporate partners, to kind of build that momentum over, quite some time before actually getting to that big UNFCCC decision of like, this is the global climate community consensus about what this goal needs to be. And where are we going now? Now we're thinking about the need to put a roadmap together for halting and reversing deforestation by 2030. But that's taking it back outside of the negotiations, right? And thinking again about what many of the speakers have denoted about the importance of those non-negotiation spaces to really dig into the details and get into the technical, what's needed by national governments that, the Paris Agreement in its kind of nationally determined manner isn't really set up to prescribe. So I think, just kind of reflecting on that timeline and what that might mean for, as Debbie was thinking as well, what can the next global stocktake really bring as like a watershed moment potentially for ocean-based climate action. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Carissa, for this. It's great to have the comparison with the forest and the ocean. It's actually great to be able to have all of you here and be able to take a step back. I have to say it's nighttime in France, but it's really giving me all of the energy to continue this discussion. We've really been able to see with all of you that the ocean is no longer only seen as a victim of climate change, but really has become a source of solution. And it was great to hear all of the different wins that we've had with Ocean in NDCs, the dialogue, the Glasgow mandate to mainstream the ocean, and all of this that we inherit from all of our mobilization since the adoption of the Paris Agreement. We're coming to an end of this discussion, but we had one comment in the chat from a representative from the women and gender constituency. So we'll have perhaps 1 minute to share the good example of the work program that have been developed by the gender constituency and what we can learn from the ocean's perspective. So I will now pass it on to our colleague Timothy Mboya from the Women and Gender constituency.
Okay, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. It's definitely an honor to speak with such amazing speakers. So just like has been mentioned, I'm just going to do this really quickly, a quick intervention on how the gender work program can teach us something in the ocean climate space. So part of the Women and Gender constituency, and that means that our focus is on gender responsive climate action. And how we do this right now and over the next 9 years is through the Gender Action Plan, which was adopted last year in COP30 in Brazil. So basically, the Gender Action Plan is the backbone for how the UNFCCC can integrate the gender process in multiple areas such as mitigation, adaptation, finance, technology, and capacity building. So before the Belém Gap was implemented, historically, women and other vulnerable communities were basically sidelined and siloed outside of decision-making processes. And now that we currently have the gap, we have an operational way that the Lima Work Program can actually be implemented by, detailing specific actions, actors, and indicators so that we can actively achieve these goals. So I'm just going to run quickly through our 5 key priority areas because I think that's where we can learn from. So our key priority area number 1 is basically capacity building, which is through training, workshops, and leadership programs, because we believe that when women are nurtured and taught all these things about the climate space, they can build their confidence to become better leaders in the future. And capacity building here also means training women negotiators so that they can be meaningfully participating in the negotiation spaces, not just being used as tokens. Our priority area number 2 is about leadership and inclusive participation. And this is basically including the women and increasing their representation in delegations, leadership roles, and technical bodies. And this ensures that women in decision-making spaces and negotiations are more represented, because if we don't have women in those negotiation spaces, and they are the most vulnerable, so if we don't have them there, we will not be representing the actual realities the frontline communities are currently facing. And our priority area number 3 is basically coherence, which means that gender considerations are being integrated consistently across all UNFCCC bodies, institutions, and processes. So gender is no longer an isolated topic. It's actually a key part and a core part of the negotiation process. So we also focus on gender responsive implementations through
Thank you,
NDC.
Timothy. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up so that we can conclude the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So I'm just going to jump ahead to what these lessons can teach us in the ocean climate space. So currently the ocean climate space faces a very wide knowledge gap, and I think that training and capacity building, which is one of the key priority areas of the Gender Action Plan, can be very useful if it's implemented in this space. Also, monitoring and reporting basically ensures that progress is tracked across every sector. So this will help parties and stakeholders to be very accountable for what they do. And currently, the ocean space has this issue of translating scientific data to actionable local global policy. So I think that defining clear objectives, like the kinds that we have in the GAP, can help translate these cross-cutting interests into measurable actions. And I think that the major issue that we have with implementation is the unavailability of resources. And one of those resources is financing and funds. So the current issue we have with the Belém gap is that developing countries cannot actively implement whatever was adopted. So I feel like climate finance is very, very important. So I'm sorry if I spoke for too long, but thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope this was very useful for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timothy. It was great to hear from another constituency, and I think it's really important for the ocean community to burst out of its blue bubble and to make sure that we can, as everyone basically said during this discussion, that we can build the synergies and that we can make sure that the ocean is not siloed. And this discussion is definitely a part of it. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but I'll definitely put my email in the chat. So if you have any more that we haven't addressed, please don't hesitate to send me an email. And with this, I'll pass it on to Anna-Marie so that she can close our discussion.
Thank you, Maureen, and thanks everyone. Just to close with a big thank you to all the panelists and the speakers today and all the participants. I love the phrase burst out of our blue bubble, because clearly that is really what's the next step to make sure that we're continuing with integration, but also the ability to give ocean climate action really the spotlight and emphasis it deserves, and the opportunity we have to do that coming up at COP31. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to turning this into a paper and collecting more questions and engagement, because we know certainly following this, we have a lot to do in the UNFCCC and beyond. Thank you all.